I knew there was a good possibility of me dying again. It's not like I'm stupid or like, like you said, I just didn't, it wasn't a choice. I had to go do that, right?
I'm a former Detroit police officer and rode with the 1%er motorcycle club. During that time, I was involved in a lot of altercations. I had a gun shoved in my face. The trigger was pulled, and I got a plate under my left eye. I'm Manny Vitale, and this is my story. Good evening, everybody. How you doing? I am Manny Vitale, the host of My Fight, Our War, and we are back home, our second home in Connecticut, and just having a great time every time we come here, man, at the people who come on the show, the stories that are told, the lives that are saved. It is just amazing. Me and OG look forward to coming here, and we are going to be expanding more. Want to give a big shout out to Coach, the man, Anthony Morrissey, the Brian Cody's Brothers and Sisters Foundation, and all the hope dealers who are making a huge difference, not only in Connecticut, but around the world. And we have been very blessed by not only Coach, but the hope dealers, and expanding that help and attacking the addiction, which is attacking all of us. Doesn't matter who you are, where you live, what you do. And so we appreciate all of our guests coming on. Mark, we've got Mark on here today, who is graciously going to come on here and share his story. And we've been chit-chatting here, having a good old time. And he's like, man, I thought we were going already.
Yeah.
He goes, I thought we were almost done. But Mark, welcome to My Fight, Our War. And thank you so much for coming on here and talking with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Well, definitely, man. Well, let's just first of all fire this up with let everyone know who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, so my name's Mark Eccles. I live up in Sherman, Connecticut. Currently the director of operations for Rehab up there, Lantana Recovery, and I run a sober house as well. So I got involved with sober living about 5 years ago, and pretty much right when I had moved up to New Milford. And so, yeah, it's just been a journey, just helping people and, meeting people like Coach and now yourself and all this great community that we have in New Milford and the surrounding area. It's, just to kind of, do what we can. It's a journey. It's a passion I have. I owe a debt for a lot of people that helped me out, that probably shouldn't have, right? And had every right to give up on me many times and stuck with me. And, I'm just trying to, do what I can to pay back some of that debt. I don't think it ever will be, but, that's kind of just where my passion is. And, it looks a little different nowadays than it did, 3-4 years ago, but it's cool. Yeah, it's good to see it evolve. And my life changes too,
It does. And the thing is, just the paths that our lives have taken. And just like me, I just had 5 years sobriety in January. Nice. And looking back at our lives, I talk to people. It's just like a lot of people do the whole. If I would have told, I've been sober 8 years. I go, okay. If I would have told you 9 years ago or 10 years ago, you'd be doing this now. Everyone laughs. It's like, no, I would have been worried about where I'm going to get my drugs or my alcohol and all that. But by the grace of God, man, people like you said, God bless the ones, because when we are in active addiction, the things there is no limit to the evil, manipulative things that an addict will do. Been there, and I'm talking firsthand. So I'm not talking for anyone. I'm talking for myself. And for those who have stood by us, we get a lot of credit a lot of times, which we do deserve for becoming sober.
Yeah.
But the people who have stuck by us through our worst of worst years. You talk about heroes because of some of the things we've said and done is sometimes, unforgivable, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But again, so I appreciate that with you sharing your stuff, and we all have our journey. And with some people, it starts from the get-go, man. When they're born, they might have their household. They're born into drugs, alcohol right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were just talking as well, though, you might have a quote-unquote normal family, whatever that is, where it's not even in the social environment, but it grabs you, and that's what addiction does. So, for you growing up, how was it?
I grew up in a great family. My parents loved me. My dad, my dad had, so it was me and my brother, but he had been married before, had 4 kids from a previous marriage. And so he had me a little later in life. And, but that man, worked hard for his family. He showed me what being a man was like, and not like, this macho guy, right?
Mhm.
So he provided for us. He loved my mother. My brother never had a problem. He'll, socially drink, but he's pretty successful in his career, and, things turned out great. And yeah, it was just, had nothing to do with that. It wasn't a lack of love or a lack of security in my home. I joked, but I honestly can't blame my parents for any
Well,
of
the
it.
thing is, though, how being with us, being addicts, what do we do best? We lie and manipulate, man.
Sure.
It's not, well, Manny, your drinking's getting out of hand. It's not my fault. If you have no idea the pressure I'm under. You guys keep
Yeah.
harping on me and all that. It's always someone else's fault, So, or my environment. Well, hey, I was born into this.
Yeah.
It's like it's not our fault. So,
Yeah, right. It's tough to own, like,
yeah,
especially in the when drugs and alcohol take you to such a terrible place to then look back and be like, oh yeah, I chose this, or I did this to myself. It's who wants to do that? You know what I mean? It's much
Yeah.
easier to blame someone else, and and there's certainly trauma and stuff that
Mhm.
I'm not dismissing that. For people that is terrible things happen, and but it's for me it was more, yeah, it was started out obviously social, which I'm sure with a lot of people did, and it just like, I don't even want to say it snowballed, because it happened over my addiction. Like, really, I maintained like a lot of times, like we were talking earlier, like I always had a job, in the first half at
Mhm.
least, and it never wasn't getting arrested. I wasn't, getting DUIs and all this stuff. And it just like, like slowly built. And then it reached a point where it just, went off the rails entirely.
See, I tell people
know
the
what I
same
mean?
thing.
So
I go, I took baby steps
exactly,
on my
yeah,
road to addiction. And people look at me, and it's
Yeah.
like, it wasn't like all of a sudden this bomb went off. It was like I lit the fuse, but it was like a
Yeah.
long fuse.
Yeah. Like, so I was just down the park with my daughter. She's I have a stepdaughter that's 10, and my other daughter's a year and a half, and she like very slow walking up the stairs to the slide, but then just wants to jump right off, and that's like what it was like,
Yeah.
very slow. But then at the end, when you just couldn't keep it together anymore, as much as I'm trying to, you know, um, put on some new sneakers, or hold down this job that's, not hanging on by a thread, it just all fell apart. And then then it was like lights out, and just took
So
me.
a lot of times, like with me, same things. Basically like a functioning addict. You're a
Sure.
functioning alcoholic.
Yeah.
So you're working, you're taking care of your
Absolutely.
obligations, and we justify it that way.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
it doesn't matter. I did this because I'm bringing home the paycheck.
Yeah.
I'm not missing work.
Yeah, and or if I wasn't shooting dope, but I was eating a bunch of perks, then I was sober. I just had this delusional thinking that like just justifying it
We
in every
always
way.
raise the bar.
Yeah, like look how good I'm doing. I'm just spending. Yeah, or if I'm only drinking, I'm only drinking. Everyone else does it, So, meanwhile, yeah, like I like to say drugs and alcohol, and it's not my quote. I heard someone say this, but they were never really a problem for me. They were more so a problem for everyone around me at the time. You know what I
That
mean?
is
Like,
true.
I didn't have a problem with it for a long time. That's how I got by, right? Like, God knows what I would have done if I didn't find drugs and alcohol. If I'd even be here, because just like, the insanity and just that, whatever, they were a solution, right? It wasn't, I knew, like I said, in the beginning it was social, but then it reached a point where I needed to do them, or I was going to go insane, so there was a purpose. I'm not stupid, right? They gave me some type of relief. The problem is when they stop working.
Yeah, it's like that temporary fix.
100%.
We're putting a Band-Aid on the surgical site. And,
exactly.
And that's what happens. And like you just brought up, though, it's like we'll justify what we're doing by saying, well, I'm not like so-and-so over there, man. He's not even he calls in sick to work. I don't.
Sure.
Until you do. Well, okay, I am, but I'm not getting pulled over like he is until you do. But then we keep raising the bar.
Well, and to your point about like, looking back 5 years ago, if you told me what my life would look like, looking back 20 years ago when I started drinking, or even when I started getting into heavy drugs, if you told me, hey, you're going to end up homeless and 115 pounds and dying with all this stuff going on, I would have thought you were totally there's no way. Like, I'm just taking a couple pills on the weekends and having a few drinks like everyone else around me, And then what happens is just slowly, like, today didn't look much different than yesterday, and that didn't look much different than the day before. And you slowly start to accept this, like, just deficiency of life that comes along with it. But it's not like I went from, having a perfect life and a house and all this to the next day. It was a slow burn, and it just makes it acceptable, right? That I just tolerate a little bit more the next day. I'm willing to compromise what little values I have a little bit more the next day. And, all right, so, I stole, a little bit, when I was a kid, but now I'm still robbing every day. It didn't jump off like that,
but
right?
we justify it. We
justify it, right? And
so I know you were saying, we were talking about like the drinking and drugs.
Yeah.
How old were you when you started, like, some people say experimenting, but
sure.
when you first started, when you were introduced to like drugs or alcohol?
Yeah, I just finished 8th grade, and I remember my brother's 3 years older, and I remember him, like, my parents would go away, and I would usually go with them because I was younger. He'd stay home, and I didn't, unbeknownst to me, he would have parties when he was there, and I remember my parents went away. I was out with my friends, and I walk in the house, and he's having one of these parties, and I just opened the fridge and just filled with all this beer, and I was like, oh, this is awesome, and they let me have some, and so that was like the first time, and I just remember, man, the relief that it gave me and just the comfort that it gave me, and then I just remember this thought of like, oh, there's not enough here, and I didn't mean for that night, I just meant like for the rest of my life, right? This is what I want to do, like. I need this stuff, like, because I'm such a better person, and I can talk to this girl, or I can, talk to anybody, right, without, stumbling over my words, which I still do these days. But it's, like it was, I'm smiling because it was amazing, right? It was, up to that point, maybe one of the best days of my life, and then from there on, it was just constantly, I wasn't drinking every day, like I said, but every time I could, I drank, and every time I wasn't, I thought about it, and probably like towards, later in high school, that's when I started smoking weed, and then, got into pills. I graduated in 98, so it was right around when oxys first started to hit the scene, and man, when I did those things, it was over. I was in love,
So you're doing both. You were drinking and
Yeah, so I got started with those, and I was selling them, and mainly to myself. I like to think I was my best customer, but yeah, and then it just that went on for a while. I finally went to like my first treatment center. Well, I went to like a detox when I was about 19. Got introduced to like 12 steps, and wanted nothing to do with that.
No, is this because of was it you're conditioning into the point where family or friends intervene and say, listen, Mark, this issue?
Just getting
or was
sick.
This you saying, maybe I should?
So my parents started to like catch on, like, I have no money, but I'm working, decent job for, a 19, 20-year-old. They started to have no money in their bank account, and they knew they didn't spend it, so stuff like that. And then I was just like, actually, the reason I first went is I had robbed this guy. He gave me some money to go get him some pills, and I just, I didn't get them, and so I needed a place to go, right? And I needed to go get away for a little while. So I went there, and it was cool, it wasn't, you think of rehab, or it wasn't really rehab. It was more like a longer detox day, but yeah, I got to smoke cigarettes whenever I wanted. I got some good food, and then I got out, and I thought that was it, right? I thought that's what people did, was they just went to a place for a little bit, got out, and they stayed sober.
They were good to go.
Not even stayed sober. I didn't think that was, the point of it, right? They just stopped, robbing people to get their drugs, right? They figured that it kind of taught them how to use moderately, I guess, right? Or
it was manageable.
Yeah, exactly. And day one, I was right back at it. Like they had taken us to like an AA meeting downstairs, and the thing I loved about that is the staff dropped us off, went upstairs, so we could sneak out and go get more cigarettes or whatever, So I was like, oh, that AA is great,
That's us manipulating and twisting the system.
And so, that's kind of where I was at then, and then I hit like a period where I got on some maintenance, Suboxone for the opiates, but I always still drank, and then I just found ways to cheat around that system, where I know I took my UA or my drug test
you started
yesterday, so I got 4 days, and I did it for a while, surprising. I mean, maybe like 5 tests, I was able to like just kind of cheat the system. And
Yeah. It's just amazing how we'll get the calendar out. It's like other people are like, oh, I got so many days till vacation day.
Yeah.
I can drink this day, do drugs this day, this day.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
Very, the way we think, it's impressive in many ways, at least to us, right? I think people looking at it from the outside are, shaking our head. But, so then I ended up going to, that's how so I ended up getting to Connecticut. I went to a treatment center, a really nice one, and it was great. And I did really well there, got out, went back home. And I think I made it like 30 days, and I was playing golf with a couple of my buddies. And I was like, I could probably just have a couple beers. It's been a while. And so I had 2 beers, and I'm driving back home to stop off at the dope dealer. And then it was just on and, off to the races again. My parents had died like a couple years prior. Well, my dad had died, quite a few years prior. And then my mom died. So like I inherited their home. And, after, I don't even think that lasted a year, I lost that. Oh, had a really good job, lost that. That was like the last time I worked, probably for about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, little stuff here and there. So I went back to that rehab, stayed longer, wasn't really doing the things I was supposed to do in that place, but I never got caught. I was, they had a real strict fraternizing policy that I wasn't too fond of, and,
oh, co-ed.
Yeah. So I got out of there, and that's, and I was in, down in Bridgeport, and just got crazy, man,
Like right as soon as you got out, it was like,
well, just
some
back
people
to
are
it.
almost like the same day.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had so many people that like, I got out at noon and I already was set up by 2:00 in the afternoon. I already had my shit.
That was most of the time, down when I was down. So I grew up in Boston, Mass. And, so every time I'd kind of end up back there, like I had a lot of resources, and then I was, like I said, down here in Connecticut. I stayed sober for, again, probably another 3 weeks or something out of that treatment center. And then that's when I just really started going downhill, and it was, homelessness and, robbing, stealing anything I could to get high, and really started getting into heroin a lot more. I mean, I had been into it before, but
When did because up until then it was mainly drinking, pills.
yeah, well, I had started doing dope probably like a couple years before that, off and on. I'd always, like I was saying, if I was just doing the pills, I was cool, and there was some truth to that, right? Like, because I could function on them for the, as long as I didn't do too many, which often happened. But but once I started getting into the needle and all that, it was just like there was no stopping, And
how did that day or night or come about for that first time? How was that introduced to you?
So I was in all my own doing, man. I was in a detox, and I remember sitting down with this girl, and I had done heroin. I'd never shot up before, and we're just sitting there, and I was like, "How do you do it?" And she's like, "Nah, I'm not gonna tell you how to do it." I was like, "Nah, I'm just."
And this is in a rehab.
This is in this detox, this state-run facility. I was like, "I'm just curious, just let me know. I want to know the procedure, you know what I mean?" And she's telling me, man, I stayed there for like another week or so, but that's all I could think about. I was like, as soon as I get out of here, that's what I'm doing, and that's what I did. I went home. I got dope. I got some rigs. I just taught myself, and just,
I mean, everyone has a first time at something.
Yeah.
So that first time you're at home.
Yeah.
By yourself.
Yeah.
What's going through your mind?
I was just excited.
More excited,
I was like,
no fear at this point.
No, because
more excitement was taking over.
It was excitement. Yeah, I wasn't really afraid. I was afraid of like messing it up. You know what I mean? And like, whatever, getting an abscess or something. But I was excited to do it, man. I was like,
because obviously you didn't know what to expect. Because someone could tell you what it feels like to have too many drinks, or what it feels like to do this.
Yeah.
But to tell you you're going to shoot up.
Yeah.
But what you're going to expect to feel.
Yeah.
So here you are, set to go.
And so I didn't do a lot, because I guess saying I wasn't afraid was not completely truthful. I just did, I don't want to like do way too much.
Sure.
So when I did it, it was almost a little bit of disappointment, and I was like, oh, I just didn't do enough, And then I did then I did a little more, and it was,
So that was it, huh?
that was it.
First time it was. That's something. Just the again, the power of addiction. Like someone, and I hate saying normal because I have no idea what normal is at all, and anything. But someone sitting there doesn't know anything about drugs or addiction, sitting there thinking, wait a minute, I gotta shove this needle in my vein. I've never done this before.
Yeah.
How do I know if it's in the vein? How do I know this and all this? But you or people like addicts are like, yeah, get all fired up. And then you do it and you're like, oh, man, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe that's a sign I shouldn't do this. Instead, it was like,
no,
I got to do more.
Do a little more. That was the issue.
So that's what happened, huh?
That's exactly what happened. Yeah. And I was pretty confident with the instructions this girl gave me. You know what I mean? So obviously. Right?
I mean, and we're not
I didn't know her from a hole in
the
the wall, but, I trusted her entirely, right?
So that was the beginning of the heroin.
That was, yeah. And then, like I said, I just, spent, the last 3 or 4 years just in and out of treatment, and some of them I'd complete, some of them I wouldn't. And then I used to live at this sober house, and this guy, I got kicked out of that house, I don't know, I'd say at least 5 times. I OD'd once in the house, big, chaos, and the guy would always help me out, man, and I never got it, right? I'm just like, why does this guy always want to help me out?
Was he like the we're owner? Or
yeah, so he like owned it, but he was in recovery,
Okay.
And I remember I walked out of my last detox, and I had no one. No one was answering the phone. I didn't even bother calling most of the people because I knew they were just done with me. And this guy answered the phone, and I was like, I don't know what to do, dude. I need help. He's like, I'll be at the house. I'll be there in 7 minutes, And 7 minutes later, he was there. He let me stay there that night. Then he got me into a place in Danbury. I remember him saying like, oh, you just got to go for 10 days, and I'll let you come back to sober living. I was like, all right. And I didn't think I didn't go there to get sober. I didn't think I could get sober. I went there again, just to get some food in me, to get a little rest, place to stay. Maybe meet the next love of my life. You know what I mean? And, I remember like around day 7, the caseworker is like, oh, you're staying for 30 days or I don't even remember the number. I was like, I don't know. No, we're not. I'm staying for 10 days. I'm out of here in like 3 days. And she's like, I don't think so. I think what we have down is like 30 days. I was like, well, you better double check that because that's not right.
Well, something like that, it wasn't court ordered, right?
It was not court ordered.
So you could have walked out anytime you
Absolutely.
wanted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So at that time I had like a few warrants for little stuff, like some larcenies and some failure to appears and stuff like that. But yeah, so no, I wasn't court ordered. But I just remember walking out of that office, and then I just did like a 180. I was like, all right, I'll stay, And I remember the words coming out of my mouth and wanted to be able to like pull them back, I was like, what are you doing, dude? Like you got big plans, when you get out of here. And it's funny enough that facility is the last place I used. I was so sick, man. I got out of detox. I'd left early, so I was still like detoxing, and a couple kids in there were like, oh, we can get some dope. I was like, just get me a little bit. I just want to sleep. If I could just get a couple nights sleep, I'll be all right. And they did. And then like, I don't know, the 3rd or 4th time they come back and they're like, oh, we couldn't get any dope. We only got crack. And I was like, dude, I need this for medicinal purposes to get some sleep. You know what I mean? I'm not smoking crack. And same thing. I walked out of that room. Didn't even give it a second thought. And I walked right back in. I was like, all right, let's fire it up,
And this is
This is in a facility. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've never been in one as a worker or as a client or whatever it is, as a resident.
Yeah.
I mean, is that common?
No, and I wouldn't even say it this. It's just, people are resourceful.
I mean, it's not like you got someone going through a metal detector, walk in and out and being patted down.
No.
So that so here there was no heroin that night.
Yeah,
but see, that's how we are too, as far as addicts. It's like we put these little barriers up. I'll drink a gallon or something, but okay, what about Coke? I will never do that. Okay, well, we're all out of liquor. But we got a couple
We got
lines
some-
for
yeah.
you. No, okay, just once.
Sure, yeah.
And then we keep moving our boundaries.
Yeah.
So
was
then
just-
you did walk back into the room?
Yeah, it was like automatic. I had every reason not to do it,
Mhm.
and I had zero reasons to do it. You know what I mean? Like I was in a place I'd never lived before. I didn't know a single person there. Like I said, the guy that helped me probably wasn't going to help me if I got kicked out, but I still did it. And it really like was probably the best thing that ever happened. Because it just got me to realize like you're done, dude. Like you can't overcome this on your own. And by the grace of God, some guys from AA came in like the next night, and I'm like curled up on the couch, shaking, and they're bringing in a meeting, and for whatever reason, I know the reason. I wanted some cigarettes, so I went up to the guy speaking. I was like, "Will you be my sponsor?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "You got any cigarettes?"
So it was an ulterior motive
For
there.
me, yeah, for sure. I didn't, like I said, I at that point I didn't realize I'd get sober, and we just, he picked me up a couple days later, and just got me into the steps, and my life started to change, and not dramatically, but like I started getting a little more sleep. I started, not feeling like such crap every day, and not being such a horrible person most of the time, and I started getting some hope for like the first time in a long time in my life, and so many people, we were talking before, helped me out, and certainly, family members that started coming back, but just complete strangers, just helped me out. And that place that I was at, that guy let me stay there, like live in that place and go get a job, that treatment center. And, just, I don't know why, but.
And this
just
is
got
that
me set up.
same person you were talking about, the 5 times you were moved?
No. So that guy got me to this other
Oh, got
place.
you to the
Yeah,
other-
this
okay.
other a
But
treatment
still, so
facility. Yeah, and the guy that ran the treatment center
Uh-huh.
let me like stay and go into the sober living house. Like a different one. Not down in Bridgeport. So, that's really just it was such a turning point. And here I am today, man. Life is pretty good. And it, like I said, I was very fortunate to get surrounded by a bunch of men in my life that, again, like I was saying with my dad, right? Like taught me what it meant to be a man, right? Like you need to go get a job. You need to show up for that job. You need to, brush your teeth. You need to take a shower every day. I didn't know how to do all that stuff, right?
Well, it just takes over. I mean,
Yeah.
like I tell people, man, now being sober, and people look at me kind of funny, like, well, because I'll get on my rants and I'll be like, things are different now. I decide when I'm going to get up.
Yeah.
I decide when I'm going to go to bed. I decide when I'm going to eat. I decide when I'm going to do this. And to the normal person, like, we all do that. Now, when you're under addiction,
Sure.
if you want to go to sleep and you've been doing blow all night, you're not sleeping for a few days or a few whatever, crank and
Yeah.
all this stuff. That will decide when you want to wake up and do something that day. You've been partying for 5 days. You'll wake up when addiction allows you to wake up.
Yeah. It's, and like you said, people don't understand that, right? I had to learn to like how to just do the normal things that people take for granted every day. And like, fortunately, like the place I was at, like it taught me, like you had to make your bed, you had to, do your chores, you had to do this, or they just,
You had your
they'd be like,
responsibilities.
see you later. You don't want to clean up after yourself, then we don't want you here, And so that was a big part of it as well. And,
How are the things with, while all this is going on? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
talking like from the drinking, all the years as things are progressively getting worse for you. What's going on in your personal life with your family and friends and the close people in your life?
yeah.
I mean, what's going on with them?
Yeah.
And their involvement.
Yeah. So I was really, I was sort of a lone wolf when I was really hitting it hard. I had a few buddies that I would go and drink with, and, but I'd usually leave there and then go, do some other stuff, either by myself or whatever. My folks were, my dad had died when I was 27, I think. So, he obviously knew, and my mom knew probably more so. My mom just really wanted to trust me and give me the benefit of the doubt. And my dad would have, thrown me out a long time ago, but my mom didn't. And it caused a lot of tension with them, like even medical issues. Like my mom all of a sudden had like high blood pressure and had to go. It stressed them out a lot. My father. I didn't see it, but I remember it was like a 3-story house, and my friend lived on the first floor. I remember him telling like he went down into the basement because that's where the laundry was. My dad was just like sitting there crying, and things like that. When he died, is really when even when my mom died, it was in one of these phases where I was kind of keeping it together a little bit, so I wasn't sober by any means, but I wasn't like, it didn't really get bad till probably after both of my parents passed away, and then, relationship with my brother suffered quite a bit, right? Because then he also took the brunt of me, like that half of that house was his, and he's getting like, subpoenas served to him for foreclosure, whatever they are, like, for foreclosure and this and that, and just causing a lot of chaos in his life. And I had some friends that were close friends that stood by me, but from a distance, you know what I mean, and I've been able to sort of reconcile those relationships today, and they're not probably as strong, but that's more geographically. Just I'm not back in Boston anymore, but I do talk to them, and with my brother, it is he's still up in Massachusetts as well, but we have a great relationship now.
That's so important.
Yeah,
That relationship with family and friends is huge. And I had a buddy of mine, and he was heavy into drugs. I mean, ever since I've known him,
yeah,
and for many, many years. And I mean, the classification, you get the happy drunk, the mean drunk,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all that stuff. Well, he was just always an asshole before then you
With the
magnify it
really-
with the other stuff.
Sure.
And then you magnify with all the drugs, and just I mean, for 20 plus years of this hardcore, just
Yeah.
and then he got sober, and he's doing great now, doing amazing.
Nice.
But like the first few years afterwards, he was not looking for, but he was getting a lot of praise and stuff like we do, and we deserve it, first for ourselves, but some of his family weren't as forgiving.
Mhm.
And I'm like, dude, just because they're family, blood doesn't mean. I had a buddy of mine tell me, he goes, blood doesn't mean shit. He goes, that just means you're relative.
Yeah.
Family could be someone who you just met and they're family to you. And he was getting all pissed saying, well, I can't believe I've been sober for 2 years, man, and he's not getting. I go, you've been an asshole for 30, and
Sure.
you've caused so much destruction in people's lives. So we got to own what we did.
Yeah, and like, can you blame them for not? I mean, I would talk to my brother, for instance, and be like, how's things going? I'd be like, I got a job, I got a nice place to live. Things are going great. I've been sober for however long, and my job was like robbing every stop and shop around town. I was living in a car, and I hadn't been sober for about 6 minutes. So it got to the point where him and really anybody, they're not really going to believe what you're telling them, and I think just I had, like I said, some guys that helped me with this, and just my actions, and just showing up, like being on time, not being, 4 hours late for his kid's birthday party and coming up with some crazy excuse about the train doing,
I tell you some of the stuff. Oh man, you're not going to. Well, don't start your story with "you're not going to believe this" because we already don't believe you. For me, it was like family was everything. I love being with family get-togethers. I first one there, last to leave.
Yeah.
As addiction started taking over, I would get there late and all that. Then as it got worse, I wouldn't show.
Yeah.
I mean, and then it'd be, hey, Ma, can you just let them know I'm sick?
Yeah.
I don't know. I must have ate something, or I had to work late, and all lies. But and I'm missing out on my own family, and which I love tremendously, and I chose addiction over that. And it's just, that's the grip of addiction.
Yeah. I mean, I've missed so many important things in family, weddings, funerals, birthday parties or whatever, and same thing though. It wasn't personal, it was business, right? I had to go do this, and if it didn't get done by the time I was supposed to be there, then I wasn't going to be there, because like when we talk about like just not having a choice, right? When my dad died, I remember that night before he died, he had pancreatic cancer, so he was dying, like you could see it, right? I remember him just like begging, not begging, but like, oh, just stay home. And I was like, I'm just gonna go out for an hour. I'll be back. You know what I mean? And I was drinking mainly at this time, and I loved my dad. I really wanted to go out for an hour and come home and hang out with him. I just couldn't do it. It wasn't a matter of I chose drinking over my dad. There was never a choice, right? Drinking was
That was the only choice.
the only
Or
choice.
the only decision.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah.
I had a guest on earlier and said same. It was just, and people need to realize that and these aren't excuses. We're not here to talk. We're not here to lie. This is as real as it gets. If we wanted to lie, we'd be sitting here saying, "Oh yeah, it's easy. Go to your meeting. Just do this,
Yeah.
and this, and you'll be able to skate." We're telling you the terrible things that we've done.
Yeah.
And like for her, it was like I said about the choice. I said, "Okay, I've got an 8-ball sitting right here, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I've got tickets for a beautiful vacation for you and your son.
Yeah.
And your addiction." She goes, "Give me the drugs."
Yeah.
And every addict, whether it's drugs, whatever, would do that. And like she said, I didn't have the ability to choose. And people that don't realize the power of addiction, they think we're lying. Like, and that's why it's so important for us and for you, your story, your own words are the turning point here, which is going to save someone's life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've walked out of hospitals after overdosing and got high within as soon as I could. I'm pretty. I like to think I'm somewhat smart, right? I knew there was a good possibility of me dying again. It's not like I'm stupid or like, like you said, I just didn't. It wasn't a choice. I had to go do that, right? And like you said, I'm not excusing it, right? Terrible things that I've done. There's no excuse. I'm just letting it wasn't a conscious decision, right?
These weren't choices that Mark made.
Yeah. It was just automatic, right? Certainly made choices to get started on it or whatever. And I certainly have choices in getting help, right? I think that's the big thing, right? Sure, I help was there. I just chose not to get it, right? But when it came to putting something in front of drinking, that wasn't going to work, right?
Yeah.
Me just not drinking, was really not much of an option,
Yeah, and it's just like I've done a bunch of shows and people ask different questions, and some of them hit me different than others. And I've had a few of them ask me, and I'd like to throw it at some of the guests too. And it shows the depth of what we'll do. So it'd basically be the highest of highs that we have in our lives with our having kids, having a great job, promotions, and all that. Okay, then throw that the opposite. What are some of the lowest of lows? And then they'll tell you. But when now you throw addiction in, that ain't nothing. So like for you, when you were at your worst as far as your active addiction, looking at now, thank God with the situation you're in now with your sobriety, when you look back now, is there something that even you look at now and go, I cannot believe that I actually did this or that? Or is there something, because I know I've got a bunch.
Yeah, there's a lot,
of?
obviously, stealing from everyone, robbing my parents, robbing anyone really, that's like sort of the obvious stuff. But the ones that really stuck with me is that instance I just told you about my dad, right? And then he ends up dying the night before. I remember my brother wanted me to, I was watching his daughter. I forget the circumstances, but I had to go pick her up at like daycare or after school program, I remember her asking me, "Oh, can you pick me up early and we can, go to the park or something?" Absolutely. No problem. I'll be there at 3:00, and I'm trying to get a hold of the plug and he's not answering and it's rolling, it's 2:45 and then it's 3:30. And I knew I had till 6 when the program actually ended, but I had made this promise. And anyways, I think I got there. She was the last one in the thing. And then when you walk up to the door, there's like, a window. And I just see her sitting there like all by herself, like coloring or something. And just, we were very close. We still are very close. But just that, it was horrible, right? It was like someone just stuck a knife in my back and hit me over the head with sledgehammer, all these things at once, just that feeling. And just, for a long time, just not being able to get that image out of my head.
See, and I love that. For me, because I've got a few feelings like that too. And I've had people say, "Oh, well, don't go there. That's the past." No,
Yeah.
I want to go back there when I have any of these poor me, whatever things. I want to go back there and remember I'm the one that caused that
Yeah.
person to feel that pain. Like for me, it was a situation with my mom making her so upset she was just bawling. And she's like, "You're breaking my heart." And I sat there like, "Yeah, okay, okay." Didn't even care.
Yeah.
So like for you looking through there and seeing this little disappointed, beautiful little
Yeah.
girl, and knowing, taking it, I did that, and so I get it.
Yeah, it's heavy, and it's like I said, it sticks with you. And fortunately for me, so I got sober, and I'd been sober a few years, and I found my faith, so I became a Christian and put my faith in Christ. And through after that, right, is when like I look at those things and I understand. So it's tough for me to forgive myself for a lot of things when I look at like what Christ did for me and the forgiveness I received from God. It makes it a little. It helps, right? It's all right if He can forgive me for these things, who I've committed horrible. As bad as the offenses I've committed to other people, they're also committed against God, and He's given me forgiveness for those sins. And that's really what my life's about now, is just, growing in that faith. And, that's how a lot of that healing and a lot of things changed for me with that, with, even surrounded like some mental health stuff and things like that. And, it's just been amazing, and I didn't start off when I got sober. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like I got, was born again day one, and it was a journey, which I'm grateful for. But, it's through that and through the process of, with AA, like going and making amends. Right. And like I said, so when I got, that relationship with my niece back in my life, like I showed up for the things that, she asked me to come to, a play or a dance recital. Right. And I showed up on time and I was there, and, and that's how those things got better,
By your actions. And
yeah. I think that's an important thing is guys, like I said, I own the sober house and I work for Rehab, and guys will talk a good game. And I used to, and it's, that's great. But, how are you backing that up with the way you're living your life?
Follow it up with, what my dad said, "That sounds great. Sounds great, son.
Yeah.
When am I going to see it?"
And they're tired of hearing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So, and the thing is too, like for a lot of people, like their faith is what gets them through. Because for me, it was like, I can do it. I can do it.
Sure.
Well, how many times do I have to fail before, and for me, I was born and raised Catholic, but I'll never push my religion on anyone.
Sure.
But whatever yours religion, that's all that matters. For you, I know you made a lot of changes in your life to get to where you're at now, obviously with the sobriety and all that. So what would what was that change that got you to the place of sobriety, to clarity, to the process where you are now with your involvement? Was it?
Yeah. So early on, it's funny. So that guy that helped me out in that treatment center got me into the sober house. He ended up kicking me out, and not for, I didn't pay rent, and I started working carpentry with a guy, and work died out. And anyways, he threw me out, right? Because everyone else has to pay rent. Why am I any different? And it was a hard pill to swallow, right? I was like, you're throwing me out? I thought, we had something going here. He's, no, he runs this place. And so, and I just thought, I was like, oh man, this is like, what's the point? I really I was doing good, like I said, and God got me through that. And I ended up coming to New Milford. I was at this other sober house for a little while, and these guys had just opened this, or were about to open this old inn, this old hotel called the Heritage Inn up in New Milford as a sober living facility. And they asked me if I wanted to get involved, and I said, sure. And so they were from Connecticut. They lived down in South Carolina, and simultaneously they were kind of doing a similar thing down there. And so we started that in 2019. We opened that up. It was like a 30-bed, or it still is a 30-bed sober living facility, and I just sort of got involved in that, but I always did it kind of on the side, and then about 2 years ago, so I eventually became a partner in that sober house, and then about 2 years ago we opened up Lantana, or we started the process. I'm sorry. We started the process to get a PHP, IOP level of care up in New Milford with housing. So we converted part of that sober living house into housing for our IOP clinic down the street. And that opened up in January, so, that's since January or even a little before is kind of a big shift. I was swinging the hammer doing carpentry up until then. And like I said, these guys wanted me to get involved with that. And, I had no desire to work in treatment. I was never the guy that got sober and was like, I'm going to, I had a strong desire to help people out. And I kind of did that, sort of on my own or through, AA or HA.
But it was never like
it was never like, I want to do this.
Career.
But just kind of being, kind of along for the journey of what they started doing down in South Carolina and, getting very excited to bring that up here. Cause what it is, it's kind of like this continuum of care, they call it, right? So maybe someone's going to like a real inpatient, 30-day program. My experience was I'd get out of a place like that and, I'm on my own, figure it out. And I'm like, what do you mean figure it out? Like, so this kind of has that like middle ground where, they'll live with us in the sober living, to go down to like clinical services, 6 days a week, and just sort of helps learn those skills, like I said, that we're so lacking in
it does seem scary, man. Like whatever the program is, it always seems like it's just not enough. Like 7 days, 30 days. Okay,
Sure.
So well, wait a minute. So what happens at 31 days? Well, you're done. What do you mean I'm done?
Yeah.
You're like you said, out the door. As soon as you walk out that door, that shield feels like, or that barrier, it's like you feel alone.
That's why like a place like this, and it's particularly new, this level of care in Connecticut, there's some others, but it kind of gives you that gradual step down process, and that's sort of how I got sober, was the place I was at did that. And, like I said, it was helpful that, like you said, you weren't out there on day 31 looking around being like, I don't have a job, I don't have a place to live. And,
It just seems like
what am I doing?
Like the plan, like, I love it with Coach. When I had Coach on, he said what he likes to try to do is for parents and of teenage or whoever is have a plan before it happens, just like an emergency plan at home. Hey, if something happens, we've got this box with our materials and our aid, whatever we need. It's a plan in case something happens. Well, like in this case with the sober living and all that, or recovery, you've got so many days. At 30 days, you've got this plan up until day 30.
Yeah.
Well, what's the plan after 30?
Yeah.
It just kind of.
Oh, and that's, and places, do a good job of doing aftercare planning. I know a lot of times for me, I just didn't take their advice, as part of the problem.
Okay.
But like, or there were times where it just, it wasn't so much they didn't maybe set me up with a sober house or something to go to. It was just more, I needed a little more structure, right?
Yeah.
I needed someone to be like, you need to make your bed, or maybe not specifically, but a place where that was what was expected of you, right?
Yeah, because it just seems like 30 days of this to boom.
Yeah. So that's like sort of, like I said, why I was excited to get involved with Lantana is that's what we provide, right? Is that you're not 100% locked down. You can go out, you can get if you get a sponsor, you can go out with them. You'll take you to meetings, we'll slowly integrate you back into like life. So you're not going from like inpatient lockdown to, you're on your own,
to freedom,
right? And then, we'll even do like a second phase or second stage where you can do like 3 days a week and still live at the living facility, and you can get a job and, a part-time job or whatever, and so, like I said, I just passionate about like that sort of model of treatment, and in the way it like sort of helps integrate people back into society. And then you also have the benefit of like that community of people living with, like-minded people that want to get sober. Everyone's trying to, work towards the same goal. They're at different phases. But man, when I got sober, I was telling the guys where, at the treatment center, because there's there's an anniversary, and you hear, oh, this guy's got 30 years. Mm-hmm. When I'm in there on day one and I'm looking at that, I'm like, it's an impossibility. There's no way, right? There's no way. But I look at the guy with like 30 days and I'm like, I might be able to do that, right? I want to go talk to that guy and I want to know, how did you even do this, right? Because that seems so.
And I love that too, what you just said, because when I got up, my situation, we don't have enough time, but I remember I was at home and there was some family friends, and there was a gentleman came over and he had 30 years of sobriety. And my situation is like, you need this, this, and this. And I was sober for 30 days at that time. That's when you said that. So we're talking, and I go, so, I kind of new at this whole thing. So how long you been sober? What are those? And he said, well, I heard it's been a while. He goes, yeah, 30 years. I mean, 30 years, man. I go, man, that's something. He goes, well, thank you. And he goes, how about you? And I go, 30 days, a month. And he goes, well, why'd you say it like that? I go, say it like what? He goes, what are you laughing? I go, it's only been a month. He goes, I had to be sober a month before I was sober for 30 days.
Yeah.
Every 30 years. And he goes, when's the last time you were sober for 30 days? And I was like, I don't know. I
About
can't
30
remember.
years ago. Yeah.
He goes, there you go.
Right.
He goes, it doesn't matter if it's 30 years, 30 months, 30 weeks, 30 days, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
He goes, don't ever shut yourself down as only. And I'll never forget that. So when you brought that up, how the different people in this room, so that's awesome.
Yeah, it's it's cool. Like I said, I coming up on 7 years.
That's awesome.
October,
man.
I think. And no way did I think I could get 7 years. Or 6 years.
And
whatever
how fast it goes.
So fast.
And you hear people say that, and I go, you can say that because it's been 10 years for you.
Yeah. Well, and so and what I've got back in my life, it's just, or where my life even is. I got married in sobriety. I've had a kid in sobriety. I got another boy on the way in a couple months here.
Congratulations.
And I have an amazing wife. She's unbelievable.
Did she know you before?
No. So interesting. So getting kicked out of that place, and I'm sitting here going, oh, my life's over. What's the point of getting sober? Had that not happened, man, so many things wouldn't have been what they are for me now. And part of that was meeting my wife, so I got involved in HA, Heroin Anonymous, and so I was bringing a meeting in to a rehab, and COVID happened, and we started doing it on Zoom, and it was great because then it wasn't really big in Connecticut, so there wasn't a lot of people to bring in for speakers. But I was able to get people across the country, and I knew this girl out in Oregon, or a friend of mine got me connected with her, and I was like, hey, you want to speak at this meeting? And she's like, oh, I can't, but my friend can. So this girl spoke, and we just started talking, and wasn't looking to get into a relationship, particularly with someone 3,000 miles away. And we just got talking, and I went out there and visited her a few times, and she started coming here, and like a year and a half later, we got married, and
Isn't that crazy?
Coming up on 3 years. Yeah. So we had my daughter, and she has like I said, my stepdaughter's 10 years old. She's, an amazing kid. Like, it's just wild, right? Like,
it's incredible just looking at where we were, what we were, to who we are, and where we are now.
Yeah.
And, for you to do all this. So what's like with, right now with all that you've got going on now, what's the day-to-day activities as far as, first of all, we always, talk about what we're doing for others, but we still got to take care of ourselves.
Sure.
So what's going on as far as you, and then your plans, and, helping all these others as well?
Yeah. So, pretty busy these days because we just opened in January this facility. So
then go ahead. What's the name?
Lantana Recovery. So that's the treatment center I work for. Mm-hmm. So that's busy, So I'll go there, and I'm passionate about because I get to get paid, right? But I get to help people and pour into people, and really like outside of work, I like to spend most of my time with my family. I've just really becoming a dad, and then to my stepdaughter, and then having a baby. It was wild. I can't explain it, and so they're like the joy of my life.
Why would you want to do anything else?
Sure,
God.
But then I'm very involved in my church, or connected in that way. I go to a rehab on Sundays, and I try to preach the gospel to people in rehabs, which I love doing. I love talking about Christ. I love talking about my faith, and just what what he's done for us, you know, and then the results of that in my life, you know, and people always are like, oh, what was different this time getting sober, you know? And that's the only difference I've come up with, right? I've tried to like be like, well, I went to that treatment center that time, but I went to that meeting when I got out, right? It's none of that. It's just God is the only difference in it. You know, I'm no better than you or anybody else that's struggling with this. It wasn't that I'm such a great person or I did this the right way. I probably did it all the wrong way, you know, but God just gave me such grace and, you know, here I am today. And that's really, like I said, that is the only variable that's different, you know, is that
I hear that
God.
so
Yeah.
much, and it's just, and it sounds so funny. I made the biggest gains in my life turned around when I let go,
Yeah.
and then people are like, "Well, I mean, you gave up?" Yeah, yeah, I gave up trying to fix me by myself. I gave up trying to do it my way, you know. And like for me, like I said, my faith is very important to me, and but I was really good at talking it. You know, it's like, okay, this is my faith. I've got to believe it. And all of a sudden, I really started doing that and things started to change.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, these bigger issues were coming up. And I was like, okay, well, this is where I got to step in. No, because these are big. So now I've got to do this. And even though in my head, I felt like I should be doing something else. But no, I know I should be doing this instead. And I do it. And of course, it wouldn't work. And it was so hard because it was like, it kept in my mind, let go, let God, you know,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, if you're going to have faith, you have to have faith all the way.
Exactly.
So all of a sudden I was just like, you know, and I remember thinking like, well, if I don't say it out loud, he won't hear me. And just thinking silly shit. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll give it a shot. I know it's not going to work or just or whatever. And then kind of just let things happen.
Yeah.
And next, you know, I swear it was like later on, my phone rings. It was like, hey, Manny, this is so-and-so from Ministries down in Tennessee. We saw your shows, man. We want you to be partners with us. We want, then all of a sudden I get this other call an hour later. All of these things that are even more than I imagined I get what you're talking about.
And like doing those little things I found is what then prepares me to trust in him for the bigger things, right? Like sometimes it's like, oh, this is silly. I don't really need God to learn how to do this, but I did, right? I needed God for everything. And by obeying him in these little things, like I said, then when those big things came up, and same thing, I'm like, you know, this is a financial issue, God. I'll straighten this out, right?
I got this.
I don't got that.
No.
Right? That's the one thing I don't, you know. So yeah, like, yeah, it's just putting your faith in him and understanding, you know, and it may not always work out for my benefit, right? It's all about his glory and his will and his plan,
time.
you know, and sometimes that isn't what I want, you know, but learning to trust that and be like, I'm okay with that, right? Because it's it's in his time.
And
right?
I you know, hearing that and believing it, but then doing it, it's just like, okay, but this
Sure.
it's because in here I'm still thinking, but this is the path I'm supposed to be on because now things are going really good because I wasn't doing this before, but something told me to do this. So I'm doing it. And then all of a sudden things started like to not going as I'm still doing the same thing, but I'm not getting the results anymore. It's like, so I'm trying harder to do the same thing with getting worse results. And all of a sudden doors started closing. It was like, and leading me here, which I'm thinking is the worst way to go. And it ended up being the best decision.
I was talking to a guy just yesterday. We were talking about, you know, the Bible and God and Christ. And he's like, well, I think it's God's will for me because, you know, I feel good when I'm doing it, you know? And I'm like, well, how'd that work out for the Apostle Paul? You know, there's a guy that got persecuted and stoned and beaten every step of the way. Do you think that felt good to him? But there was no doubt he was doing God's will. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So don't always think, you know, oh, it feels good, so it must be God's
physically
will.
Until you get rewarded.
That's my will, and try to like filter it through God's, you know, and justify it, you know. So it's also easier said than done, right? Like I make mistakes, so, you know, so often, and I'll still, you know, be like, I don't need to pray, or I don't need to, you know, read my.
Don't you love the
Bible
negotiation part?
Yeah.
It's just like, all right, well, just, and I've caught myself doing that where it's just like, all right, tell you what. Did I just say, tell you what? to God.
Yeah,
Tell you
yeah,
what, give me a sec. Hold on. It's just like, what are you doing? I just like laugh.
yeah,
But I love our priest at work at church is amazing,
yeah,
and just hearing him and some of the things is just so intense, and just knowing the faith has just got to be so there that it's what you have in store, what you think is good, is nothing compared to what's about to happen,
sure.
which is going to be great.
Hmm.
And it's like, I don't get it. It's not your job to get it. That's the
That's
hardest part for me.
that's hard.
Was
Yeah,
like, I don't understand why I'm not doing this and doing this. That's the beauty of faith. You don't have to.
yeah,
And instead of me doing that and making it easier, I thought by me doing this, I was doing just the opposite. And when like I said, when we talked about it afterwards, I was like, oh, that was easy.
yeah.
He goes, well, just listen.
If I understood God entirely, he wouldn't be God, right?
Oh, exactly.
It's
so
like, I don't
there's
there's so much that he's got this master plan, and we're a part of it, and however he chooses to use me, I just need to accept that and dive into it.
Well,
And it's crazy to sit here and talk like I grew up Catholic too, but I was so anti-religion, and I would be the guy that I'd go into a meeting and they'd talk about God, and I'd want to debate with them. Not that I didn't believe there was one, but I just thought I didn't want nothing to do with him. He didn't want nothing to do with me, and that was fine, right? I was good, and when I got sober this time, I remember I was in that place. Like I said, that gentleman came in and spoke, and I was just miserable. And one of the questions he asked me was, "Do you have a problem with God?" And every other time in my life, I would be like, "Yes," and here's what they are, right? I just remember just being so broken. I was just like, "No, I don't," and here I am,
And sometimes it's just, I had this one lady actually say, well, God hates, people this and I was just like, hey, I'm going to let you believe whatever you want to do. I'm not going to sit here and talk about hates and all this stuff. I've had enough hate in my life for a lifetime, and I don't want any more. But it's just that point where you are just so physically done,
Yeah.
where I don't feel anymore, and
Yeah.
I just that alone, empty feeling, and then all of a sudden, just feeling that all of a sudden a beacon or that warmth that just engulfs you
Yeah.
that I hear about from other people all the time. When it happened to me, it was the most intense, amazing. There was no no drug that could top what happened that day.
Yeah.
As I was at the place in Detroit, the Father Solanus Casey Center, very my happy place, and it happened to me there. And to this day, when I think about it, just like, and
It's amazing, right?
it is intense.
I've had I was doing some step work when I got sober. I had one, but I remember the first time I went out and tried to sponsor another guy, and we went and we met and we're talking, and I remember coming back to where I was living at, and I had to lay down. I had this overwhelming feeling. I had the same exact thought. I was like, I didn't have to go rob anybody. I didn't have to hurt anybody. I didn't have to hurt myself. And I get to feel this way, and it was like,
Yeah,
this is cool. And that's really like when that passion for helping others really made sense. Like why do I want to do this? Well,
that's why.
To be able to give that to someone,
Man, and you're definitely doing it. And
Yeah.
again, what? Why don't you give how do people get a hold of you if they need assistance as far as getting into with your organization or any of that? How do they get a hold of you?
So they can go to lantanarecovery.com. That's for like I said, our PHP IOP housing. And even if they're not at, even if they need a detox or something, our admissions team they'll get them somewhere, right? They're not going to be like, oh, we don't do that. Call this person. They'll work with people.
No matter what the issue.
They may not be the right fit for us, but it will get them to where they need to go, or, insurance might be different than what we take, so they'll certainly work with them. And then the Heritage Inn Recovery Residence is the sober living. I think, shouldn't say I think as being an owner, but it's soberlivingct.com. So
Okay.
that's the website for there. You can get, my phone number's on there. And, if anyone's looking for sober living, or honestly, if anyone just wants to talk to someone or needs to talk to someone and they call that number, I get so many calls that are just people that I can't help. One, we're a men's house. So a woman will call looking for sober living, and we'll end up having a half-hour conversation, or someone that, like I said, isn't needs more like a detox than a sober living. But just I enjoy having those conversations
Just a
with those people and just
conversation.
guiding them. All right, well, do this, right? This is what you need to do, and just being able to interact and just or parents. A lot of times, parents will call, look in, and they're they often need someone to talk to, and so
And just
those
giving their
conversations,
time.
yeah,
Just to not to get one of those calls. For making that call is terrifying.
sure,
So you got this
absolutely,
person now, and people are like, just call. You don't. Again, it's not that easy.
it's not,
These steps for a normal person to pick up a phone just to make a call pizza is no problem, and it's not the same when you're calling a place to say, "I need help. I'm an addict. I'm an
yeah,
alcoholic. I may kill myself." I mean,
yeah,
these are serious, and so for stuff like that, and just to not call you. Yeah, I'm calling for this. Oh, I'm sorry, we don't do that, but sorry.
yeah,
But so for you to do what you do, God
yeah,
bless you, man,
yeah,
because
because
just giving a 5, 10, half hour of your
yeah.
time could just change that person's
Sure.
life.
Sometimes people just need someone to talk to, Like I
Yeah.
always tell people, they'll be like, "Oh, I'm only, 5 days sober. How can I help someone?" It's like,
Hmm.
can you listen? And just listen to someone. If someone wants to talk to you, just don't be cutting them off with interjecting your story or just listen. Just sit there and listen.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what
like
most people want.
with my fight at war, we don't tell someone you have to do this program because I did have a guy on one time and he was really cool. Then all of a sudden he had his own agenda. He
Yeah.
goes, well, just so you know, because someone was typing in some comments and agreeing. He goes, well, I wanted to do this type of. I don't feel well doing this type of program. It's very uncomfortable for me, and it was what he's doing. This gentleman was doing. He goes, well, if you don't do it, he goes, I'm just letting you know you will fail. And you will, and I was just like, whoa, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
And I go, listen, yeah, I know you mean well, but we will not set anyone up to failure here. What works for you, it works for you. God bless, but we will give opinions, suggestions. And if it didn't work, we'll try something else. If that, we
hmm
already tried it, we'll try it again. And if it doesn't work, then we'll go down the line and never stop trying.
And we were talking before we started about just the amount of resources that are available now
Mhm.
that, yes, what worked for me, like I needed a real low bottom, like, hard nosed place that really wasn't going to tolerate, much from me. But some people may not need that, or they're in
Yeah,
different places in life, or they got, you know, they got a job and a family. They can't just up and go to, 90 days of treatment. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean they're going to fail, right? Like
exactly.
people get sober, just walking into an AA meeting, right? Or
Oh,
people
yeah.
get sober just walking into a church, right? I've heard testimonies of people that were shaken in their bathtub and cried out to Christ, and that was it. They never had
Done.
to drink the rest of their
I,
life,
I
you
was
know?
I was told that I was going to be dead in 6 weeks because my
Yeah,
pancreas, kidneys, and liver shut down.
yeah,
I had to say goodbye to my family, friends, and all that. Long story short, grace to God, I'm still here,
yeah,
and they can't figure out why. This is when COVID hit.
yeah,
I couldn't go anywhere because of COVID. I never went to a meeting, never had any intervention except, and that's it.
yeah,
So I get you, and
yeah.
so
There is evidence and statistics
mhm.
that say, if you do treatment and
Mhm.
longer, you probably have a better
Oh,
chance.
6.
But it's, not necessarily you have to, right? Like for me, I did. For others, they don't. You know what I mean? It's everyone's on a different journey or different place in their recovery, and so it's like I said, it's right now we have so many options, even just in Connecticut, but throughout the country that the help is there, and
Yes,
we just trying to one of my favorite things to do is just guide people to the right place, or guide to a place, right? It doesn't have to be what I'm
exactly.
involved with or anything like that, but just get them in the door, get them like you said, when someone's picking up that phone for help,
Mhm.
if that guy didn't answer that phone when I called him, like I said, I had no one else to call. I had no one else to call. My cell phone was probably on 2%. You know what I mean?
It was one of those things.
They're probably going to kick me out of the Dunkin' Donuts. So I wasn't going to have Wi-Fi, and it didn't have, so who knows what would have happened, right?
Yeah,
That guy answered the phone. I didn't, he didn't gain monetarily from it. I didn't end up staying there. He sent me somewhere else, and
exactly.
that's what it's about, just helping people in whatever way we can. And, it's just, like I said, something I'm
And I tell you,
passionate
God
and
bless you, man, and for all all that you've gone through, that you are doing now and continue to do for yourself, your family, and your community, man. Thank you so much.
appreciate
And
it.
definitely, we'll be promoting you, let you know. In fact, why don't you shoot that website out there again, or that link? Where can I get you at?
So for treatment, they can go to lantanarecovery.com.
Okay.
So we have a place in Connecticut. We also have a place in Charleston,
Okay.
South Carolina. And then sober living is soberlivingct.com. So
Perfect.
yeah.
Well, Mark, I really do appreciate
I appreciate you having me.
And I always tell all the guests, for people that come on this show, this is never just a one and done. And some guests come on, it is a one and done. I
Yeah.
never see them again. But I always have an open door. It's like, listen, this studio here, I'm here every 6 weeks. I offered you, like when we first sat down, if you've got people that want to come here, because not everyone wants to do this, and God bless you if you do. Please, we're here for you, just like with Mark. So please reach out to Mark. You heard his story, and the reason he's still here is because he didn't quit. He didn't give up. And not only that, but now, who better to help someone suffering than someone who suffered knows what it's like. So appreciate you for that, and we will be coming back to continue this fight with Coach and Brian Cody's foundation, yours as well. So until then, man, appreciate you guys. Thank you for your support. Remember, addiction is only a word. Addiction is not a death sentence. So please check us out. Go to YouTube at My Fight Our War, subscribe there, and on over to TikTok and follow us there. And until then, guys, keep fighting the good fight.